COVID has finally provided a way to bridge the gap between drone benefits and explaining or demonstrating those benefits to decision makers, right? So now the question is, how do we keep this momentum as COVID plays out?
You're listening to the Drone Radio Show podcast, the show about drones and the people who use them for business, fun, and research. Hosted by Randy Goers.
Hello, everyone. This is Randy Goers, and welcome to the Drone Radio Show podcast, episode 289. What did we learn from this year's virtual Commercial UAV Expo? For that question, we turn to Linda McLaughlin, Conference Program Manager at Diversified Communications. Diversified Communications is an international media company with more than 15 years' experience in producing world-renowned events for precision measurement professionals. If you're in this field, then you've most likely have attended one of their events, including SPAR 3D Conference and Expo, the International Lidar Mapping Forum, or the Commercial UAV Expo. In 2020, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, Diversified Communications launched a virtual version of its successful Commercial UAV Expo. In this edition of the Drone Radio Show, Linda provides insights into this year's show, some of the topics that were covered, and a few lessons learned from the online virtual event. But before we hear from Linda, I want to thank those of you who are supporting my funding campaign. Whether it's $1, $100, or much more, you can help defray the cost of production and keep the podcast going and growing. Go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And by the way, if you have an idea for a great show and want to share your experience, please contact me at randy@droneradioshow.com. So let's find out what happened at this year's Commercial UAV Expo with Linda McLaughlin of Diversified Communications. Let's pick up the interview where I asked Linda to introduce herself.
My name is Linda McLaughlin. I'm a conference producer with Commercial UAV Expo. I also produce our other events, our SPAR 3D and AEC Next conference, which focuses a little bit more on terrestrial applications of 3D technologies.
Linda, how long have you been with Diversified Communications?
I've been with Diversified for, I guess it's about 10 years. And I had come over from SPAR when Diversified Communications had acquired SPAR. And SPAR was producing the newsletter, which actually still exists as SPAR View. I guess I've been doing this for about 20 years, and it started with use of laser scanning, primarily for industrial facilities and offshore platforms, that kind of thing. And so it expanded from there. And of course, in recent years, the use of UAS has grown in all the events that we produce and all the content that we provide. That interest has grown. So it made sense for it to be spun into its own event. And so, yeah, that's been about, 5 years now. So.
And your role is to help organize and present the events themselves, right?
Yeah, I think I'm actually kind of a conference producer. So kind of working with the speakers, identifying content, kind of shaping content into sessions that make sense. It's actually been really, I think, valuable to really focus on the commercial applications of this, not trying to be all things to all people, right? So we don't attract hobbyists or military, that kind of thing. And of course, Drone Responders has the track that really focuses on the public safety and emergency response content. Obviously, high interest in that as well. So,
do you help select the speakers?
Yes. And of course, as you know, we have an advisory board on whom we rely. So the process is really, we have a call for speakers, and the advisory board will then help us kind of vet the abstracts that come in. And we really like to focus on end user cases. Everybody's always interested in the case studies, what works, what doesn't work. And even some of the speakers like to challenge the vendors and say, listen, this is what our vision is. This is where we're at, and we need your help to get there. So I know, for instance, Khaled Salem from Saudi Aramco, that was his particular interest. And saying, here's what we need from you, and we need your help to get there.
So the virtual edition of the UAV Expo recently concluded. What were your overall impressions?
Well, I think what we've kind of learned is that the content part of it is easier to stream. For packing the exhibit floor, it's easier to do that in person. So getting attendees to go into virtual booths is a little harder. So I think in terms of what we would carry forward with us, the matchmaking app that we used this time, I think that's definitely a success. And so we'll be able to use that even at in-person events in future.
What did you pick up from the sessions?
What we've found is with the pandemic, there's been almost a springboard in the use of technology. I think we've all kind of seen that, and that was absolutely borne out. I know, for instance, Karush Langari is at Caltrans, and he was a speaker in the infrastructure session. He's observed that, and the thing that's been really fantastic for infrastructure and construction is that because they haven't had as much traffic on the roads, they've been able to do a lot of this work. And, because everybody's working remotely, we've all been forced to use technology more, so I think we've seen a lot of that.
Where were drones finding the greatest adoption?
As I say, I think construction, infrastructure, we've definitely seen that. I would say also for inspections of, say, pipelines and cell towers and things like that, all of these commercial applications that we focus on really seem to be seeing this. Same thing in agriculture and ranching. I would say absolutely mining, especially. I think it's extremely interesting because, of course, as we've seen, the price of gold has gone up. A lot of these materials, say aggregates, all these types of things, there's been an increase in the need for these. And so mining has gone up. And Thomas Hahn, Chief Operating Officer at Turner Mining, was a moderator, in surveying and mapping discussion. So I think we're seeing it everywhere across commercial applications.
Did you find that people were generally upbeat about the industry, at least the ones that you had contact with?
I would say definitely. I think there is absolutely a lot of optimism there for it. Even, for instance, we're just seeing more and more applications of it. So Khaled Salem from Saudi Aramco, he mentioned, for instance, emissions detection for compliance of pipelines and things, security surveillance, inspections, of course. All these things are really key.
Drone delivery really has come into its own during the pandemic, hasn't it?
As you know, we had a really fantastic session on that. So UPS, Wing, and Zipline were all represented in this keynote plenary panel discussion, and that was moderated by Lisa Ellman of Commercial Drone Alliance. Absolutely, I think that is true. One thing that interests me personally, I think it'll be kind of fascinating to see how this goes in terms of heavier cargo, right? So, for instance, a Brewing aircraft was at this conference as well. So, where will we see those things happening for kind of the smaller, lighter deliveries, starting with medical deliveries, of course, and then moving into some of the retail applications and consumer applications.
There were some discussions on innovative solutions, like using solar-powered cells as range extenders for multi-rotor drones.
Well, I just think it's kind of a fascinating concept, kind of like the Tesla approach, right? So, if we have an airframe that is really kind of focused on optimizing battery power, or solar, or, I don't know if it would be fuel cell or that kind of thing. I think there's just a lot of potential there. It's kind of exciting because that does seem to be really it prevents a lot of further ability to go a long way. So, with your drones. The other thing that we heard a lot about too that I think is so interesting and kind of moves over into a lot of the content that we produce for SPAR and AEC is the digital twin. Capturing this information and being able to make it available more readily for the digital twin is something that we saw at this conference.
What is a digital twin?
So basically it's a virtual representation of a physical asset. So I think the tantalizing possibilities there are if you have information that will be available in real time, you can kind of keep up with it virtually, from a distance.
Of all the people that have delivered a keynote at the UAV Expos over the years, which one stands out?
A few years ago, I'd say it was 5 or 6 years ago, Michael Jones from Google had given a keynote. And it's funny because a lot of the predictions that he had made at that time, he had been one of the originators of Google Earth and Google Maps. So he was talking about how crowdsourcing would be a way of collecting information. And so, for instance, when we had this webinar on the digital twin, Ted Mort had mentioned that as a method for collecting information in retail environments. For instance, one of the clients he's working with, a retailer, and they're collecting information from customers by putting up a contest for them to take pictures of the end cap and send it. So they've constantly got refreshed information coming in on their end cap, right? And how that's changing and the success of it and that kind of thing.
What makes a good speaker, in your opinion?
Being very specific, right? Because I think that sometimes if there are concepts that are described in the abstract, it doesn't tend to grab your attention as readily as something that's extremely specific. As for instance, when Ted was talking about, customers taking pictures of an end cap, right? And applying that toward the digital twin and refreshing information. So these kinds of things. And for instance, if you're going to be talking about, utility inspection or even, for instance, applications of UAS for emissions tracking and all these things, it's really important. And the more specific, the better, right? And even metrics are really good. Everybody loves to know, they love to benchmark, right? And how you scale your drone programs and how you did that, these kinds of things.
What sort of trends are we seeing in the industry right now?
We've seen some trends, of course, I think for public safety, we've seen that there's a greater public understanding of its value, right? And so I think that would absolutely grow, of course, the drone delivery. I think, Mike Blades from Frost & Sullivan had moderated this plenary session, basically looking at what has the pandemic meant and what are the opportunities moving forward. So he was saying, for instance, that COVID has finally provided a way to bridge the gap between drone benefits and explaining or demonstrating those benefits to decision makers, right? So now the question is, how do we keep this momentum as COVID plays out and beyond? And we need to start evaluating which changes will be permanent and which will be temporary when deciding which solutions to provide and how, So I think really it'll be kind of interesting to see how we're able to use the lessons learned here.
What did you learn about this year's virtual event that could be carried into the live expo?
One thing that we tried to incorporate was fun. And I think, for instance, I know you had joined Jeremiah in that conversation with other editors. And you know what I mean? So that kind of thing. And so what'll be kind of fun is how much of this we can carry into a live event, an in-person event. So for instance, the, game of drones trivia, right, that we had. And then, for instance, Sam Billingsley is one of the speakers actually in surveying and mapping. He had moderated as well. But he had given a Tiki tutorial for Tiki Tuesday, right? So we were thinking it might be kind of fun if at our live in-person event, he might have his Tiki tutorial set up there. And I think, that's one of those things where I think we all miss kind of meeting in person. So how can we take the best of what we've had here for a virtual event and, the ways of connecting people and incorporate that so that the in-person event is going to be even better.
What kind of feedback did you get from the attendees? Did they enjoy the event?
Content was appreciated. I think a lot of people understood that, we did have some issues with buffering and things like that. But I don't think I've been to a single online event that hasn't had that problem. So we kind of anticipated that might be an issue. But we're hoping that kind of the exchange of the opportunity to connect via LinkedIn and via the app, which is, and see sessions, they'll be able to do this through October 17, so if you were not able to take advantage of some of the sessions you missed, you can go back and see those videos. So I think that's one other thing that's kind of, something that you can't do if you missed an in-person event session. So, there are some things that came out of it that were actually, I think, pretty helpful for people and attendees appreciated that.
And for my final question, Linda, what message would you like to leave regarding the value of these types of trade shows, whether virtual or live?
So Thomas Hahn, right, he's Chief Operating Officer at Turner Mining. And he had said, whether it's virtual or in person, conversations about strategic topics with subject matter experts are valuable for all of us attending as well as participating, right? So I think this kind of conversation and moving things forward, just constantly learning from each other, advancing the use of the technology and applying lessons learned. I mean, it's really important. We all miss it. We all miss this connection. So
that's it for episode 289 of the Drone Radio Show. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Linda McLaughlin of Diversified Communications. I want to thank Linda for taking the time to speak with me. If you want to learn more about Diversified Communications, the UAV Expo, or want to connect with Linda, check out the webpage at expouav.com. If you like the Drone Radio Show, please consider supporting the podcast with a small donation. The content is always free, but for as little as $1, you can help defray the cost of production. To donate, go to droneradioshow.com/donate. And thanks for listening. Your support means a lot to me, and I hope you'll listen to more episodes of the Drone Radio Show podcast to hear how others are using drones for business, fun, and research. For the Drone Radio Show, I'm Randy Gores.
This has been the Drone Radio Show podcast. More information on today's show can be found on our website at www.droneradioshow.com. If you're using drone technology for business, fun, or research and would like to share your experience on the show, please visit our website and fill out a guest appearance application. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite social media channels.